Hello everyone, Rufi here with another video for ValueHeavy. As you can see today I'm not alone, I'm here with Leo, one of my students, and we're gonna do a live sweat session. Leo plays 25 NL on rush&cash GG, as you can see. But yeah, I'll let him introduce himself.
Thanks, Rufi. Hey guys, so my name is Leo. I've been playing for around 3 to 4 years. Started taking it a bit more seriously maybe 2 years ago. And yeah, so slowly going up the stakes. And then around a year ago, I reached out to Value Heavy and started coaching with Rufi. Actually, no, maybe like 6 months, but yeah, and it's been very helpful. I used to be stuck at like 10 an hour-ish, and then since then, um, my results have been pretty good. I think I started getting coaching around here.
Mhm.
I don't play that many hands, but since then, the win rate's something like 12 to 13 bigs per 100 pre-rake, and then like 6 bigs post-rake, something like that. So definitely very helpful. And um, yeah, Rufi style is very good for like theoretical understanding and simplifying concepts. So I really benefited from it.
Thank you very much, Leo, for the nice introduction. But I must also say, like Leo is one really good student. I feel like his understanding of the game is really important. Whenever we went through the concepts, like he already knew some things, and we were able to move quite quickly. I think you also said it yourself, right? Your biggest issue is just getting having enough time to put in the volume.
Mhm.
Because I'm sure you would also do fine at 50 or even 100 NL if you just had either the bankroll or the time to play those stakes. But yeah,
Mm.
let's get into it and see
Yeah,
how's it going and if we can learn something together.
yeah, let's jump into it. I guess my plan is just I'll do some commentary where I can, but sometimes I'll um, go silent if there's like a big pot. And yeah, let's see how it goes.
Yeah, I'll
So,
be quiet and only commentate
mhm.
after the hands, or make you sit out when there's something interesting.
Yeah, so this spot, I think range check on the flop is fine, monotone. And I feel like here it's already quite indifferent. I think given blind v blind, I have to probably call one street with like nut, no pair, but not too sure. Monotone, 100% sure. Then here, I think can either check to bluff catch or go for a block bet, get called by like a weaker pair. But on this occasion, maybe I'll just go for check. And we win at showdown, which is pretty nice.
Hmm. I think you slightly overestimate the value on a monotone and a sideboard. It probably
Yeah,
just should fold straight away.
yeah, I
Um, and against a small bet, maybe you can float. But yeah, if this were like a rainbow texture, you definitely could need to continue.
yeah. And I guess just maybe worth mentioning, I play pre-flop quite exploitatively, so sometimes you'll see me do some questionable opens like this one. I like to open cutoff very aggressively because people don't three-bet enough, and people flat too much. So this is probably in theory, maybe Jack 10 off, you can start opening, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good
Yeah.
exploitative adjustment in any zoom pool that people just don't three bet you enough, and you wanna, especially from late position, open more.
Mhm. Here, I think king high board can check, can bet. Might start off with a very small bet to support like a higher frequency. I'm more comfortable in like a small bet check back line rather than like, check back and face a big bet. But yeah, I think here, I think people probably overbluff a little bit, but without like a spade or anything, I'm just gonna fold, but not too sure. Maybe this is one we can talk about.
I think just standard well played. I wouldn't really do anything
Yeah.
else. Um,
And then here, this is obviously a nice hand to start bluffing with two overs and a flush draw. The board is low, so we want to go a bit more polar. So something like half pot with this hand is probably good, and I'm very happy with the result, obviously.
Yeah, well played. Important to sometimes check back, like a flush. It's not really range bet board, right? So we have to
Yeah,
have some
yeah,
check backs here. But if your opponent's not enough, putting not enough pressure on you, um, you know, it's okay to just bet all of your your high
yeah,
equity bluffs and strong hands. Um,
yeah.
so yeah,
I think
obviously
I
flush
would,
draw mainly betting.
yeah, I think I might check back ace high flush draw sometimes just because, if I had like ace king of clubs, maybe I'd mix in
Hmm.
some check backs because you have some showdown value.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. So I think ace nine suited is either uh so I'm gonna flat here because he's two big blinds. I think ace nine suited is either um a call or a three bet, but I like to over three bet a bit because people don't four bet enough, and I can use my position to bully people. And then here again, similar, gonna start off with a small bet. As I mean, half pot bet.
Also well played. I like it. I wouldn't really play any flats on the cutoff and just always
Hmm.
three bet. And I think ace nine is strong enough to always three bet. Bit more careful on this flop 7-5-3. It's a bit more connected, right? I can fortress straight can come. You definitely want to have more checkbacks. Um, then let's say on the 9-8-3 disconnected board, right? Which
Yeah,
is quite a bit better for you. So just keep that in mind.
yeah,
Um,
because
but
they can have a bit more sets, I guess.
they can have more sets in the turn can be quite a bit worse, right? Like the 4-6 can come and devalue all of your overpairs, while on the 9-8-3 board, there's no real bad turn for your overpairs.
Hmm. And then on these like cash drop tables, I just limp, uh, hoping to see a flop with. Yeah, I mean this is quite GG specific, but um, I would open shove with like any ace X stuff like that because it's essentially 10 big blinds deep, um, and paying one big blind to see a flop is not that bad.
Yeah, I'm not as expert myself on these cash drop tables, but
Hmm.
the most important thing is that you play loose and you play a lot of hands. You get involved. You limp a lot, and you have to jam a lot pre-flop, as you said. And
Yeah.
I think,
And then here, I think he goes for like 40, well, actually more than half pot. I think with, I think the pair four might be already indifferent, but the board isn't particularly favorable for him. So I think calling once is fine, but I wouldn't be too surprised if actually you should fold. And then double barrel is just an easy fold.
yeah, I think against half pot you probably still call any board pair. Maybe fives without a heart becomes indifferent on the flop just because you have less outs. But I think
Hmm.
any pair you still on the flop you still need to call.
Yep. And then opening quite aggressively from small blind because people overfold, people don't three bet enough, stuff like that. So maybe not any two, like two, three off, for example, I wouldn't do, but yeah.
Yeah, this is one where at Micros you can go quite crazy and
Hmm.
open close 22. Once you move up to 25-50, you have to maybe tune it down a little bit
Yeah.
or make it dependent on the opponents. But yeah, the basic idea is just right. As soon as he doesn't three bet enough, we just get to realize too much equity to the point where almost any two become profitable, depending on the three bet frequency.
Yeah. And I think this one very similar to the one just then. I think check or half pot will be the strategy. This hand maybe has some showdown, but I generally find people overfold to like this kind of aggression out of position. So uh I go for it, but not too sure. And then the turn obviously hits our range a bit better, but I don't think I can go crazy here. I'm just going to. His range is quite strong after he calls a half pot. Um, I'm probably just going to give this one up. But yeah, this is, I guess, the kind of hand that I'm least sure about, so we can talk about it
Yeah, this one
afterwards.
we can sit up
Yeah,
and talk about quickly. Yeah.
after this one, I guess, go for a smallish code one. Position's arguably a bit tight, under the gun and then cut off, but I think this is probably okay. And obviously folding to a shove. Okay, great
All right,
result. So
good
so
result.
we can talk about this one.
Yeah, but you can also quickly talk about the ace queen just because it's a bit
Yeah.
quicker. Um, in those positions, probably actually just a fold, and you'd
Yeah.
rather pick a hand like king jack suited just because it has a bit better playability. And then an easy or an important part here is when you code forward in position, you
Hmm.
don't need to go much larger than like a min raise. So even like
Yeah.
13 or 14 big blinds kind of do the same job here. You don't mind really if he calls because it's so easy for you to play, and you just
Hmm.
lose way less when the guy jams on you. Especially when you kind of overdo it with hands like ace queen offsuit, which probably at 25 and L is still fine, but people give you way too much respect and maybe fold pocket pairs or some of their suited broadways are already pre-flop. But yeah, I think the smaller sizing achieves the same, puts them in an even tougher spot, right?
Hmm. Yeah, makes sense. I think I'm definitely not surprised that you can just fold it since it's maybe if it's hijack into cutoff, it becomes a little bit closer, but I think under the gun
Yeah,
is yeah, I think that if the both opponents are regs, then it probably is a fold.
this one. Yeah, so
Yeah,
this
and then
hand,
this one.
this one is interesting. So again on the flop, this is one where you definitely have to mix, right? It's not
Hmm.
that good that you can range bet, and he kind of instead of you can either go the route of saying, well, my opponent's overfold, so I just bet,
Hmm.
which is definitely fine. But you can also go in a way of saying like, okay, which of my overcards with backdoor flush am I gonna bet, and which of them am I gonna check? And if you think about what are you gonna fold out, right? So if you bet half pot here, he still probably has to float his ace queens with a backdoor flush draw, maybe some ace jacks, and then some king queens, right? Um,
Hmm.
so a way to kind of do this would be to bet over cards with a backdoor flush draw where you fold out hands that dominate you, um,
Yeah.
and check the ones that don't really do that. So if you have here ace jack, that's a nice hand to check back just because you want your opponent to still have ace 10 in his range, ace 5 suited in his range that would otherwise fold. But if you had let's say queen jack suited or queen 10 suited here and you see bet that hand, you fold out a lot of hands that dominate you,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So that would be one way to go about it, but obviously betting here is still fine. And now on the turn, this is the one where I was surprised to see a check because I remember we did this lesson.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the king is probably the best card in the deck for you. He just doesn't get to call any king X really on the flop, other than maybe like ace king offsuit if he has that pre-flop. King queen suited is already really close in this position and probably just mainly a fold. So yeah, you improve to tons and tons of new top pairs while your tens through queens are still really strong. So you can and should put a lot of pressure, and you can probably just simplify to half pot range on the
Hmm.
king
Yeah.
turn.
Yeah.
Similar on a jack, which is really good, and the queen as well. Queen is a bit
Queen
uh,
is a bit, yeah, because the ace queen he
exactly.
might have, yeah.
Ace queen you might have. Same on an ace, right? On an ace is a really good card for you. Also want to bet a lot, but probably not range just because he's floating. Ace queen, ace jack, maybe ace 10. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
on the king, I definitely just range bet. And again,
Hmm.
this is from an exploitative point of view also one where people fold the most, right? Because tens is probably supposed to call it the frequency or a lot of his pocket pairs, but he doesn't really have, he already has bluff catchers on the turn. So it probably just end up at least barreling the turn, and then probably also shoving the river. As
Hmm.
played, one thing that I would also pay attention to is the way how quickly he checked the river. Right, he snap checked the river,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, kind of capping himself. Right, you never really win at showdown. I mean, sometimes maybe against someone who gives up. Um, but again, you could go for bet here, right? Like if you
Hmm.
check back on the king, you could have queens, jacks. That hand could potentially bet maybe a king 10 suited that um, you know, didn't want to barrel on the turn. So you definitely have hands that can reopen here. Probably not. In theory, it's probably a check back once you check the turn. But given his snap checks, I think it's fine just to make him forward. A hand like sixes, fours, threes. Sorry, fours, maybe 5-6 suited, 5-4 suited. Right. Those are hands
Yeah.
that you could check call on the flop and then snap check on the river, which kind of suck when we lose to them. Tens is maybe one that calls anyway, but who knows? Maybe he's even folding those. But yeah, I think that the
Yeah.
main mistake here is on the turn.
Yeah, makes sense. I do remember now. We did do a session. It's like these kind of low boards. Um, the turn card really starkly divides up your strategy. Like for
Yeah,
example, if the turn comes like a nine, then he can implement high frequency donks, or like if it pairs the eight, it pairs the seven, and then um, people underestimate how good Broadway cards are for us. So yeah, definitely one good to recap.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
cool. Yeah, makes sense. So, okay.
And then there's always the exploitative argument as well, right? There's just people usually or generally overfold versus double barrels into pots with out
Mhm.
of position
Yeah,
on pretty much every board.
yeah, exactly. I think we discussed before as well about open folding from the big blind, but
Yeah, it's not the highest TV play, but of course it's
yeah,
most of the time not really going to harm you, especially now when we do a video. I guess it's okay, but yeah, you always obviously want to see
yeah.
if it folds around or not.
Okay, so we go three-way. Here, I think an easy call, especially when he goes a bit small. So this guy flats from the small blind and donks out. This board is quite dry. I think I'm okay with like calling him down, especially since he's not full stack. Maybe there's an argument to raise here, but I think okay, I think now I'm going to start raising because I definitely want to get the whole stack in. Just, against a recreational, just keep it simple, not thinking too much about balance. Okay. If he has like a hand that beats us, then so be it. But I think this one pretty standard. Uh,
Yeah, I'd agree. I really like the just call on the flop, right? You really want
mhm.
to let his air,
Yeah, just blast
continue
off.
barreling and then continue blasting. Once he doesn't blast on a turn and he sizes down, I think we kind of have to raise, as you said, to get the stacks in.
Yeah.
Also, the board got a bit more connected. The only thing I did do different is probably raise a little bit larger. If he has a
Hmm.
flush draw, a 7x with a redraw, or ace x, he's never really going to fold. But by only raising small, it's kind of getting difficult to get stacks in by the river. So maybe go to like 16, 17. Uh, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
a small thing.
Sweet. And then here, this guy's a little bit short, so typically I might raise to 12, but very minute adjustment, like somewhere, something like this, I think is okay. Facing this really large four bet, I think it's definitely not calling, given the SPR is going to be so low. Um, I'm gonna exploitatively just fold here. Maybe not even exploitative, but here I'm gonna go for start off with small bet. But yeah, if we could talk about it, I think it's a pretty clear fold, given people probably underbluff their four bets as well. And he goes so big, I think it's either shove or fold here. And I think folding you can't go too wrong. I'm
Yeah,
not sure. Yeah.
definitely. And just quickly, what's the most important clue about this hand
Uh,
that makes this fold that makes fold the best
oh
of any
yeah.
option? Not necessarily his sizing.
Is it the speed? Is it his timing? Like,
Yeah. Is this guy a fish or is this guy a regular?
let's see. Probably a regular. Yeah, he has 700. Yeah, looks like a regular.
Yeah, maybe from the stats looks like a regular, but normally, well, I'm not sure if it's different at GG, but if a guy has a broken stack and opens 3x, like
Oh
those are
yeah, yeah.
usually indicators for him being a recreational,
True. Yeah, yeah.
um, which like you don't really have people marked, but I would usually tag everyone with a short stack or recreation with either short stack or who opens 3x as a recreational. And recreationals are really, really bad at forward bluffing. Like
Yeah,
against
yeah.
those, you could even
No
probably
bluffs
fold
there.
tens there or something. So yeah, definitely make sure to get in the habit of over folding. But they maybe like 3% forward. They might even flat ace king offsuit there. They might even flat hands like queens.
Yeah. This one, I think against a perceived reg, in theory, it's a fold, but maybe it's not. I think ace 10 suited, I would definitely start three betting. Ace nine is a bit on the boundary.
Yeah, exactly. The suited broadways, all of them, the suited aces, you can mix. It should be kind of low frequency. If you do all of them, you definitely do too much. But
Mhm.
if you think they're weaker or you have an edge post flop, you can definitely also go for it.
This one I was going to say if he opens to 3x, I might throw in a bluff three bet just because we're so polar. But if he makes it so small, then happy to see a flop. And on the low board, he goes for a check, which makes sense. And I think my strategy here will just be simplified to half pot. This hand definitely falls into that category. Needs a lot of protection, strong enough to go for two streets at least.
Yeah, 100%
Pretty
agree.
standard, I think.
You can check back, as always, right? But if people don't really put enough pressure, it's okay to be a bit more face up and just bet the majority of your top pairs there.
Yeah,
Only really once you move up, you need to think about that you also have to check back your top pair sometimes, even on low boards like this one, so that your check back range doesn't just become ace highs and bottom pair or whatever.
yeah. Okay, and then not a bad flop for a hand, but a very bad flop for our range and very good for the opponent. I think one that he can even consider donk betting. So I think a range check back in theory is probably fine. And on this turn, obviously very connected, and we have a lot of showdown value. I think going for another street might be a bit greedy. I think I'm gonna try just a large bet now and then reevaluate river. Okay, and an easy check back. Here, three-way, and the board is not insanely good. Just gonna go start with a check.
Maybe you can also sit out and talk quickly about this hand.
Yeah. Then here, against a clear recreate, well, 10 hands, but a perceived recreational. I think this hand facing like a smaller bet can maybe defend, but half pot out of position is just a little bit too big, I think. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
two interesting hands, even though they're small. So
Yeah.
the 10-9, you're saying that on this flop you wanna check a lot. How much do you think, or what would be a flop strategy on 7-7-6 button against button against big blind?
It might be a low frequency, like a polar strategy, definitely. So I'm thinking my hands like eights, nines, tens might want to bet pretty large, um, but probably at a low frequency. Uh, yeah, I thought this is like bad enough to range check, but not sure. Yeah.
Okay, very, very interesting. I remember this one was one of our very first lessons, so I guess it's a long time ago by now. Um, but there's a big difference if this board is 7-6-5 or if it's 7-7-6, right? 7-6-5 is one of those boards that where the big blind should lead, where we probably want to check a lot and we could implement a bit more of a polar strategy and we want to bet low frequency. But paired boards are generally really good across the board for the pre-flop racer, right?
All right.
Um,
Okay.
all of them, we have a decent betting frequency on. Now, of course, if the paired card is lower, where to the point where the big blind has more of them, or even we share an equal amount of them, it's worse, but never near to the point that we range check. It's very rare that we range check as in position as a pre-flop raiser.
Got it.
So like maybe under the gun against big blind on like 5-4-3 or something like this.
Right.
Um,
think
But
I focused too much on the rank of the cards and the suitedness. But yeah, I do recall now. Yeah.
yeah, so the what you can do here is just you play small bets like on all
Yeah.
blind boards, and maybe you can go with a 50% frequency on a board like this one. Depending on how much your opponent check raises, you can increase that frequency. Your hand can go either way, right? There's no need to bet your hand. Pretty much all of your hands, apart from the strong hands, will mix anyway. That's fine. And then the turn, not gonna pick too much on, if you should small or big bet sizings. Both is fine. And the river is probably a bit too thin to value bet, although it's close, right?
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
could maybe
a
still
queen I
consider.
definitely would. Nine is like it's just because I went for because I mean on a flush completing connective turn, I bet big, so it's like even bigger than if it's a bit like overbet or like a pot size bet on a more dry board. So I maybe overestimated how polar um they are when they call against that bet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because he could be defending with some like naked ace of clubs or whatever was my thought. Was my thought.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
You will probably lose, but yeah, because it's paired, you can probably check back the nine high flush and bet back the queen high flush. But he will still need to call you sometimes with a random ten without a flush, right, or a seven without a flush. So there's still a lot of worse hands. And then the king
Yeah.
ten.
Makes sense.
Um, I like that. Just check on the flop and then facing a bet. If you were heads up, I don't think you could ever fold, even against half pot. You could either raise or call because your multi-way makes things a bit worse, right? Because that basically or should make the cutoff range a bit stronger when betting half pot into two people compared
Yeah.
to versus
Yeah.
just one. Still, you could consider either calling or raising, right? There's a lot of
In
runoffs.
hindsight, I think a raise is not too bad. A lot of cards, because we have two backdoors, kind of a lot of cards can let us barrel on the turn.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't have a queen, and if he just overvalues a hand like pocket fives and stabs that multi-way because he's afraid of so many turns, also just by calling, there will be a lot of runouts where he will be unable to continue, and we can bluff him off the hand later. Right here against recreationals, we have to kind of take their sizing with a grain of salt and be like, they just don't have a one-third button, right? So they
Yeah.
just bet half
True.
pot instead with hands that are way too merging, way too weak. So we kind of also need to put in more money with hands that would normally maybe be indifferent or early folds.
Yeah. Makes sense. I agree.